Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Before we begin the press conference, a quick reminder, please use the handheld microphones that are kept on either side when you're asking questions so that it will be recorded proper. And today's moderator will be Assistant Governor, Ms. Asoka Handagama. I will hand over to Mr. Handagama to moderate the session, please. Over to you, sir.
Good afternoon and welcome to the opening press conference for the year 2019. As usual, normally there will be a presentation on the status of the economy, but since the governor covered the whole story during his announcement of roadmap, I don't think that presentation is not necessary at this press conference. So we can start straight away with the questions. The governor will make small briefing, and then you may start the session. Over to you, Governor.
Thank you, AG. Just to say that, as you know, we didn't have our normal press conference after the monetary policy review, so if you have any questions on that, we'll be happy to answer, as well as on the roadmap. On the monetary policy review, just to say that at our previous press conference, we set out the reasons why there are pressures to reduce rates and other pressures which argue for maintenance or an increase in rates, and they haven't really changed. I mean, the reasons for reducing growth, reducing interest rates include, below potential growth rate. Inflation is actually below the lower bound. High nominal and real interest rates, and the monetary aggregates are in pretty good shape. As against that, there is pressure on our reserves on the exchange rate, and to reduce rates in such a context can be very counterproductive. And as I said during the presentation on the roadmap, you give different weights to different indicators at different times. And right now, the pressure on the external sector is most urgent. So we have to take that into account. And the Monetary Board placed significant weight on ensuring that you don't create conditions that would increase the pressure on reserves and the exchange rate. So that was broadly the thinking behind leaving rates as they were. The rest of it, of course, you just heard the presentation on the roadmap, so any questions you have, please go ahead.
For reserves at the year end, number one, and the growth of as per last year, and how are we to meet the $1 billion maturing sovereign debt expected within the next couple of days?
So on the India growth reserve figure was 6.9 billion, 6.95 billion, 6.94 billion US dollars. That was the India reserve figure. As far as the sovereign bond repayment is concerned, there is a carryover of about 650 million US dollars. In terms of the Hambantota money and the term loan from China, the government has used some of it, but there is a carryover of about $650 million. So there's only 350 million more to find. We had a fairly well worked out plan to raise money. As you know, we were able to reach staff level agreement with the IMF on the 26th of October. And on the same day, Parliament passed a resolution under the Active Liability Management Act, enabling the government to raise up to the equivalent of rupees 310 billion, which is roughly about 1.7 billion US dollars. So we had all that enabling provisions, plus we had spoken to a number of banks, the People's Bank, the Bank of Ceylon, NSB were all helping as well. But of course, all that got disrupted by the political developments. Clearly, the banks wanted to wait and see, and they want to reprice what they are willing to offer us, given the fact that we've now got downgraded. I'm confident, not only confident, I'm pretty sure we would not have been downgraded if we had staff level agreement, as well as the parliamentary approval to trigger operations under ALMA. If we had both of those in our hand, I'd be very, very doubtful. In fact, I'm almost sure that we wouldn't have been downgraded. But now that we have been downgraded, we are having to renegotiate with the various financing sources. But as I said, we have to find 350 million. We have pretty much found all of that. But now we have to, clearly there are other obligations during the course of the year. So we are in the process now of really picking up the threads from where we were on the 26th of October.
As we see it now, Governor, does it mean that by the end of this month, our reserves would have gone down from 6.9 billion minus $1 billion to about $5.9 billion?
No, I don't think, I mean, as I said, it depends how quickly we can negotiate. That money will be made up. I mean, there are enough sources of financing that are there potentially. Maybe a bit less, I think. Maybe about 3. Ne? I think it'll be about 3% for last year. Around 3. Yeah, and also we are working towards an international sovereign bond issuance as well. Maybe more. We'll have to see what other money, we have to look at what the money available is. But the good thing about the sovereign bond is, say 5 or 10 years is available, so it's a longer term.
What were the AFOs as at today, Governor, week on week from the government securities market? Foreign outflows, net foreign outflows from the government
Net
securities?
outflows last week.
No, this week.
This current week,
Yeah,
last 3 days.
This week ended today, or this week, or after yesterday, last week.
Monday to Wednesday.
That's right.
Monday to Wednesday, I don't know how much went out, do you know?
But there was an NFO, is it? No, there was a...
Yeah, outflow. There was an outflow. That's really what is causing the pressure on the exchange rate, really, the capital outflow.
Yeah.
Yeah, the former governor has said that the dollar will go up to 200 rupees by April. What do you think about it?
One thing is, it's very difficult to predict or forecast what's going to happen to the dollar. I would be very disappointed if it did.
But the measures you said about oil and hydro, those are all short term, isn't it? It can change at any time. So how do you see that then?
So really, I told you we are a twin deficit country, and we have become a twin deficit country because of poor policies over a number of years. This didn't happen yesterday, day before. Over a number of years, there have been very poorly judged, poorly conceived policies. That's what has got us to where we are. So what really, all that we can do now is essentially, it's a holding operation. What we are trying to do is have good policies, on the back of that raise money and meet our obligations and give ourselves time to increase FDI and exports. That is the way you get out of it. But that is not going to happen tomorrow, day after. But in order to give ourselves time to do that, we have to have very sound macroeconomic fundamentals which enables us to raise the money we need to buy that time. So that is what's really happening now.
How do you expect to win the ball, Governor, in the backdrop that this year's election is? It's going to be very tough as far as Scrum is concerned.
That's when you have to win the ball. The thing is this, we have to understand we are in a different paradigm. This is very important. I hope you all will explain this to the people. In the past, before elections, we would have a bit of a tamasha, or a big tamasha. Then our macro indicators deteriorate and our external financing requirement increases. In the past, we would then go to the IMF and get a program, And the IMF program would give us concessional money, to be on concessional money, which will fund part of the external financing. Then on the strength of the IMF program, the World Bank used to convene a donor meeting. Then the donors would pledge money to fund the external financing gap. And for years, Sri Lanka was a kind of a donor darling because, we had a liberal polity and liberal economy. So donors were trying to show good development outcomes in a country with those characteristics. So they would contribute generously, and also most of the money actually came from the ADB and the World Bank, about 60% from the ADB and the World Bank, through their concessional windows. That is IDA and ADF, International Development Association and Asian Development Fund. And that money had like 10-year grace period, 30, 40-year maturity, and less than 1% administration charge. So that was the scenario. And so we have got used as a country to having these tamashas before elections, and then have an aid group meeting, get the money, then, and under the IMF program there'll be some belt tightening, but then come the next election, again the same cycle. This time, we are a low middle income country. We don't have that aid group meeting to help us. We have to go to capital markets to raise the money. And if we have an indisciplined budget and poor policies, we will get downgraded again. And we will lose access to capital markets. We won't be, I told you, we are trying to raise money to buy time. If we can't raise money, then it will be very, very disruptive, because we will have to compress our imports dramatically. We won't have foreign exchange to pay for our imports. We would have to compress our imports dramatically. People's living standards would deteriorate dramatically, and there'll be massive austerity. So this is very different from the past. Of course, we were a low middle income country in 2010 as well, but in 2010 we had relatively little commercial borrowing. And there was very easy money available at that time, because all the major central banks were doing quantitative easing. So we were able to have a little bit of a tamasha, not 2010 and 2015 to some extent. We were able to have a bit of a tamasha and raise money from commercial markets. Now, two things have happened. Our borrowings are much higher, our obligations are higher, and the conditions, global conditions have got much tighter. So if we don't understand that, because I get very disturbed, because everybody, even fairly well-informed people, say, oh, the election is coming, so they'll have to have loose policies. I mean, we really need to smell the coffee. This is a different paradigm. So we have to do things differently. We can't keep making the same mistakes.
Governor, you basically wanted more inflows, whereas you are trying to limit the foreign holding into government securities to 5%. Yeah. Any particular reason for that, apart from what you mentioned?
Not apart from what I mentioned. I'll ask, STG can also say something maybe on this. You see, when we had pretty benign global financial conditions for a long time, central banks were indulging in quantitative easing, lot of liquidity in the system, interest rates were low, and very little volatility. The VIX index, as they call it, which measures volatility, everybody almost forgot about it, because volatility was so low. But now, volatility has increased, right? Interest rates are going up in the US, and the interest rate cycle in the different major economies at different places. Earlier there was very much a kind of a harmonized position where everybody had extremely low, zero or near zero interest rates. Now the US interest rates have gone up, Japanese hasn't, Europeans are thinking of increasing, so it's at different rates, at different points in the cycle, in the interest rate cycle. That creates greater volatility in the system. Plus you are having the trade tensions, you are having somewhat, how can I put it, somewhat unorthodox policies in the US, etc. All that has elevated uncertainty, and in such a context, foreign institutional investors right? Not FDI, but FII, that is very footloose money. Goes in and out very fast. So those are the people we gave this 10% limit to in very benign global financial conditions. But now in a much more volatile global financial context, it's better not to have as much exposure to them. That's basically the rationale.
You mean, are you trying to prevent hot money to?
Yeah, this is hot money. FII is hot money. Sorry, let him.
Yeah, just to add that, I think this context is that if you look at basically we don't encourage short-term volatile capital flows into our reserves. That's the reason we think lifting to 5% is probably around $1.4 billion maximum exposure. Whereas if you look at when money were coming easy, for example, in 2015 we had about $8.2 billion of reserves, out of which we had, I think, exposure was short-term capital was about 2.5 billion, and currency of again more than 2 billion. If you look at that quality of reserves, out of total gross reserves 8.2 billion, 2.5 billion was government securities investment by foreigners, and other more than 2 billion were about short-term currency swaps. If you look at situation now, that is why we are in this situation now. For last 2 and 3 years, almost during this period, this 2.5 billion outflows came down to 900 million, and we purposely reduced the short-term swaps from more than 2.5 billion now about 700 million. So what we have now, 7 billion reserves, exposure is only 900 million in terms of short-term money. In terms of quality of reserves, we are in a much better position now. So this is what we want to ensure going forward. Our quality of reserves, we encourage long-term stable money like ISBs, syndicated loans, all these things we can bring in. But this kind of short-term capital flows that can go out within a year or so, we can increase our reserves by encouraging those money come in. But the risk is that in time that money can go out. This is what we learned last almost this period, and just to improve our quality of reserves, having more stable money, so that we can meet debt service obligations rather than waiting all these people, if they won't take money out, then we are in a difficult situation, challenging situation. That is why I think much more prudent policy. If we are in a situation like we have, say, 20 billion reserves, then we can have a little more exposure. 20 billion out of 2 billion can be that volatile money, we can still manage that. When you are in a situation like 7 billion reserves, if you are encouraging bringing another 3 billion short-term volatile flows, then obviously you can encourage that. But that has a risk of any time going out. So that's, I think, the much more prudent decision. And also then who are interested, for investors, would also know we are not exposing ourselves to that kind of risk. And anyone who wants to come in can come in and lock in within that limit. I think that would, in our way, would generate great interest than having an unlimited exposure, and then we are exposing ourselves. And some countries would, the way they address that is that, what they call capital flow management issues. Like in Malaysia, they allow these people to come in, and there is a holding period. You have to hold at least 1 year. Likewise, you can have that kind of measures. I don't think we are in that position because we need to have a much more higher level of resource so that we can bring in that kind of measures. No, I mean, there are several other financial instruments, right? The ISB, syndicated loans, other bilateral basis. All these things are other instruments. And also, obviously, as you mentioned earlier, panda bonds, samurai bonds, all these options are available. Only thing, those could not be pursued in last 2.5 months because of the political uncertainty and without a budget. No one will be willing to invest in those instruments unless we have a proper policy and budget, all these things. Now things are coming into place, so that I think, as a convention, we are confident that we can go back to normal market conditions and raise much more stable long-term funds to finance the government. It's 940 million is 3.1%. 3.1%.
How certain are you that the IMF program would be back on track now that we have the pricing fuel, the formula for fuel has been we have put it in the last week, and the fact that the mechanism, the automatic pricing mechanism for electricity was to have been on board in September. Under those circumstances, how certain are you that the IMF program would be back again on track?
I am not aware that the formula for fuel is in the dustbin. But it may be adjusted, but the basic principle is to have full cost pricing. And now how you achieve that, whether it's through a formula or something else, there are various ways of doing that. But my understanding is that we have not moved away from full cost pricing, even during those 6-7 years when we had a different dispensation. They said they don't want a formula, but they didn't say they're moving away from full cost pricing. May I just also, now that SDG has spoken about improving the quality of reserves, I actually didn't complete my story about money printing and open market operations. I think I started by saying that one of the reasons why we are addressing the liquidity shortage that the liquidity shortage in the money markets came about for a couple of reasons. One was because we are purchasing dollars, we are selling dollars and purchasing rupees and taking rupees out of the thing, and I explained that one. The other one is this unwinding of swaps, because right now the priority is to improve the quantity and quality of our reserves. So reducing swaps is a high priority for us. That's right. So in that process, of course, it created a liquidity shortage. So, as I was saying, you have to twiddle the knobs. So, the priority we have to give weighting now is to improving the quantity and quality of our reserves, and in doing so, there is a liquidity shortage that has been created, and that is being addressed through open market operations. And as I said in the presentation also, that is very different from monetizing the government deficit. This is really managing the liquidity to essentially guide the short end of the yield curve.
Okay, you didn't ask my other question about the electricity pricing formula, which the IMF agreed to
So-
the IMF had it on board in September.
Yeah, so those will have to be negotiated again. Already contact has been made with the IMF. SDG and I have actually had, I think, 3 conversations with them. The minister also will be engaging with them soon. I think he may make some announcements as to how he is going to engage. So they are happy to engage, and so the program will need to be reviewed. But the broad parameters I suspect will be the same, but there will be some leeway to negotiate. And actually, there is provision for the EFF to be extended by a year. So that is something, again, the government could negotiate if it wants to do so.
Excuse me,
Doc-
can you speak to the mic, otherwise you need to go.
Doctor, speaking of the IMF staff level agreement, have any amendments been made to the conditions of the agreement?
So we reached an agreement on the 26th of July, but since then the circumstances have changed. So the IMF would want to review exactly where our macroeconomic indicators are, and the government also may want to review some of the conditions within the agreement. So both sides will have to negotiate, but I think there is a commitment on the part of the government to continue with the program, and the sense we have is there is an understanding on the part of the IMF of the need to look at it again, and hopefully they will show flexibility.
Also, Governor, speaking of the Singapore FTA, the 20th section of the expert committee report on the Singapore FTA states that the Monetary Board had approved a certain number of expatriate officers to Sri Lanka through the FTA. Do you have any idea about this?
Through the FTA?
That is, expatriate officers to come to Sri Lanka.
No,
Yeah, but-
no, I think Director Banswan can respond to that. There's no, what we have incorporated in the FTA under financial services, actually, we are the ones who negotiated that one. Is what we have incorporated, the exactly current terms and conditions and status that is applicable, we incorporate that into FTA as well. This is a number of expatriates who can come in to the banking sector is already given in the banking directions that we have given. I think
There has been no
yeah,
relaxation,
there's no
am I
relaxation.
right? There's no relaxation.
Same condition.
Yeah. I think it's worth doing, yeah. I think it's worth doing. It stretches out the program, but whether you do it for
So
6 months or a year.
I think what Governor mentioned was that the under extended fund facility programs that can go up to 3 years. So there is a provision if both IMF and government agrees, if you make a request, and there is a provision to extend the period as well as to enhance the financing facility, both.
Yes, yes, yeah.
We have,
But it depends on the terms and all that. You have to negotiate it.
Not that we are considering, we can make government can make a decision to make a request. Then on the basis of the request, IMF will have to negotiate and agree to our request. It's not that, we can consider anything. It has been negotiated with the other party, and they only will have to agree on the terms and conditions.
You see, because it's an option definitely, because.
It's an option.
Yeah, and as you said, the government can make a request, because what you have to see is how much more money you can get and what the terms and conditions attached to it are. So all those things one would have to negotiate.
Governor, just one more question. Considering the political sensitivities, in the event we have the electricity formula on board this year, on the backdrop that this is election year, would the IMF be flexible enough for us to have that formula on board next year?
So those are things that will have to be negotiated. Essentially, what will have to happen is for the government first to see what was agreed on the 26th of October, then to see what it can and cannot do, and see whether there is anything more they can do, and essentially then take a position and go and negotiate it.
Governor, in November, was there any political push to spend reserves to defend the currency?
No, no.
And from what we see now, you
Actually, I must tell you, right through the, for some time now, for over a year really, there has been no political push for us to do anything.
and now you have reduced the threshold for foreigners to own rupee bonds.
We are going to, not that.
We haven't done it
We
yet.
intend-
That is one thing. Now you are saying here we intend to take actions to revisit liberalized capital transactions. Earlier you curtailed vehicle and gold imports.
Those are
So
not capital
whenever there has been a shock, there's been a knee-jerk reaction from you to look more inwards. Is this something that you want to be seen as a central bank? And also you are now going to do more surveillance on currency transactions. This is like a police state, and you are looking inwards. I mean,
Okay.
is this a legacy that you want to leave?
No, sorry, I think we need to clarify that there's a bit of confusion there. What you mentioned, capital account liberalization are for capital flows, capital and financial flows. Under new Foreign Exchange Act, Central Bank and the Minister of Finance Authority obviously has relaxed certain requirements for financial capital flows. So what I mentioned is that we will continue that process to relax capital flows. What you mentioned, the motor vehicle imports are current account transactions. Those are prudential, macroprudential measures from time to time government or central bank can implement to address short-term, those are current account transactions. They're already fully liberalized. But then government can impose a margin requirement is a macroprudential measure. That's not a capital control. So don't get, these are two different instruments to some have certain short-term impact from macroprudential purposes. Others are capital account liberalization process, a much more medium to long-term process on the basis of, where we want to go in terms of capital account opening. So we are partially open capital account.
But
That's what we mentioned.
Yeah, in fact, it's quite the opposite of what you're implying, because we are looking to see whether the capital account can be further liberalized. So it's not as though we are looking inward. What we said about the capital account is that when the conditions are right, there'll be consideration as to whether the capital account can be liberalized further. That is one. And as SCG said, these macroprudential measures, if you have pressure in terms of your current account, you can either use tariffs, you can use the interest rate, you can, exchange rate, or you can use macroprudential measures. You can have a whole series of measures that you can use. And they don't necessarily have to be permanent. Once the pressure comes off, I think if I'm not mistaken, I think we did say, particularly these margin requirements are not intended to be permanent.
So by when are you hoping to remove the margin requirements?
It depends on the data. It depends on the data. When the pressure on the current account, the undue pressure on the current account is reduced.
And can I know what's your reserve target for this year, by the end of this year?
But for 2019,
Yeah.
I think we said 7 billion, if I'm not mistaken. Am I right?
No, for this year,
2019?
19. We are not worked out
a
yet.
target. But a lot will depend on how we are able to raise money and things like that.
Governor, when the ISB, what is the timeline that you are thinking of for the ISB, and also can you explain about the single policy rate, what you plan to do?
You mean the corridor? Okay, I'll get the SDG to talk to you about the single corridor, single rate rather than a corridor. The on the ISB, essentially, we want to move as quickly as possible to do all the preparatory work. Clearly, there's cabinet approval and ministry and cabinet approval, and then there's a tendering process, etc. So we would like to get ourselves ready as quickly as possible, and then look for an opportunity in the market. Depending on the market conditions, we'd go as quickly as we can.
On this single rate, I think this is something we have announced even some time ago. There's a part of the implementation of inflation targeting regime, where a lot of countries where they have inflation targeting, their key instrument in managing inflation is to target short-term interest rates. So to do it much more effectively and efficiently, some countries use this band, and one of the reasons why we have reduced the band is to maintain a much more stable short-term interest rate, because earlier we had a 2% band, and we brought it to 1.5%, now it is 1%. So here the idea is to move towards a single short-term interest rate, so that we can target precisely one rate, and there could be tolerable level in between, like say within that we can say 0.5% up or down can be basically allowed within a short period. So here the principle, the rationale behind this is inflation target. A lot of countries have, there are some countries have banned, some countries have. Idea is to our ability to target short-term interest rates much more effectively. Single rate would be much more, I think, appropriate than a band. Then can vary within the band. When you have single rate, we can focus more on maintaining a single short-term rate. That's the idea. This is not something new. This is a transition process. Once we complete the inflation target regime, probably or even later, we can move towards that depending on market conditions. So it's probably what we have mentioned is 2020 is a full implementation, but moving towards a single rate can be even, that we have to see much more efficient open market operations and money market operations, so that we can have much more stability the way we target short-term interest rates. Then that's why we are trying to bring it the bands lower first, and then we expect that to be maintained within that band, and then ultimately we can go to a single rate.
Governor, බැඳුම් කරන්නෙකුතු සම්බන්ධයෙන් ව්‍යවහාරික විගණනය ෆොරන්සික් ඔඩිට් එක ප්‍රමාද වීම සම්බන්ධයෙන් ජනාධිපතිතුමාගෙන් චෝදනාවක් එල්ල වුණා. මේ ප්‍රමාදය සිදු වුණේ මහ බැංකුව පැත්තෙන්ද?
අත්ත වශයෙන්ම මේ ප්‍රමාද වුණේ නැහැ. මේ
ඒ කියන්නේ දැන් ආරම්භ වෙලා තියෙන්නේ.
මම ඉංග්‍රීසි කියන්නද? Now the commission report was issued I think in December, end of December. So we started work in January. Then
Report was issued in January.
it was issued in January. Okay, report was issued in January, which is when we started work. And this is a very complex process. First, we had to look at the recommendations of the commission and determine what we should do about it. Then, and the commission said that we should undertake this exercise in certain areas. Then you have to work out the terms of reference of each of the forensic audits. There are altogether 6. And we did that, and we got the assistance of the Auditor General to make sure that the terms of reference were robust. Then after that, we had to call for expressions of interest from people with a global practice who had the expertise to undertake this type of exercise. Then on the basis of the responses to the EOIs, we had to put out RFPs. Then the RFPs came in, and then people were shortlisted, and they were asked to submit their proposals. Those proposals are now being evaluated. And then we will have to have another phase where the financial proposals are submitted and evaluated. Now all this has to be done in a very careful way, because if the process is even a little wrong, someone can go to court and the whole thing will have to start again. So you can't rush these things. And the cabinet appointed, what they call it, consultancy committee.
Cabinet appointed tender board.
Tender board.
And TEC, Technical Evaluation Committee.
But isn't that called a consultancy something or something? No, for this. The consultant procurement, the cabinet appointed consultant procurement committee and the TEC have been extremely careful. As I said, if there's even a little bit that is wrong in this process, it can be challenged in court, and then we start all over again. So this is why it has taken a long time.
We had to follow the national procurement guidelines.
Also, that's right. So there are actually 3 specialists from the Treasury who are procurement specialists in the committee. And also I think they have representation in the TEC as well, right? So these people are helping us to make sure that we follow the national procurement guidelines extremely carefully and accurately. So this is not something that can be rushed, because as I said, this is something that is very complex and needs to be done very carefully. So it has been done. Hopefully by February, that's the target, we will then award the contracts for the undertaking of these 6 forensic audits. Each of the forensic audits is expected to take a different length of time. Some 1 or 2 are for 3 months, and I think the longest one is about 9 months. So if things go according to schedule, everything should be completed by the end of this year. But we should complete 1 or 2 in 3-4 months. And also, I think we are asking for interim reports from each of the audits as well.
අධිපතිතුමා ඒ ප්‍රශ්නෙට මම
He had a meeting at which he was told about the process, but also about maybe 3-4 months ago we sent him a...
So he knew the process and the reasons for delay before sacking the government?
No, I don't think he sacked the government on this.
That's one of the reasons he was mentioned.
I don't think so.
No, in his speech he said that is also one of the reasons for sacking.
What was the reason?
The forensic, the recommendations of the Presidential Commission on the Central Bank had not taken place.
That's right.
And it is
said the
delaying
recommendation-
deliberately.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons for the sacking of the government.
I think he said he talked about the recommendations as a whole and some of the other inquiries and certain commissions and things like that. I don't think he specifically mentioned the forensic audit.
No, he said that.
No, he said that it has taken a long time. That is true, but that maybe in his view it has taken a long time. But
No, that's haven't you all informed
we
him?
have.
Keep
We
him
have.
informed about the process.
We have kept his secretariat informed.
අධිපතිතුමා මේ විස්තරාත්මක විගණනය සම්බන්ධයෙන් ප්‍රශ්නෙටම අදාළව මම අහන්න කැමතියි. ජනාධිපතිතුමා පැහැදිලිවම ප්‍රකාශ කරා විස්තරාත්මක විගණනය ප්‍රමාදයි කියලා. ඒ සම්බන්ධයෙන් අඩුම ගානේ ජනාධිපතිතුමාගේ ප්‍රකාශයෙන් පස්සේ හරි ඔබතුමාලා ජනාධිපතිතුමාට පැහැදිලි කරාද මේ ක්‍රියාවලිය මෙහෙම ප්‍රමාද වෙලා නැහැ කියලා හරි ජනාධිපතිතුමා දැනුවත් කිරීමක් කරාද? ඊළඟට ෆොරෙන්සික් ඔඩිට්ස් 6ක් යනවා කියලා කිව්වා. ඒවා මොනවද? ඒවා විදේශ ආයතන හරහාද කරන්නේ? ඒ ක්‍රියාවලිය චුට්ට පැහැදිලි කරන්න. මාස 9ක් යනවා කිව්වා. ඒකට 6ක් තියෙනවා එක ෆොරෙන්සික් ඔඩිට්. ඒකට EPF එකේ වෙච්ච පාඩුවත් අදාළයිද? ඒ සම්බන්ධයෙන් පැහැදිලි කරන්න කැමතියි. ජනාධිපතිතුමා මොකද පැහැදිලිවම කිව්වා ෆොරෙන්සික් ඔඩිට් එක ප්‍රමාදයි කියලා. ඒ පස්සේ හරි ජනාධිපතිතුමා දැන් හරි දැනුවත් කරලා තියෙනවද මේ ක්‍රියාවලිය මේකයි කියලා? නැත්නම් රටේ නායකයා මෙහෙම ජනතාවට කිව්වහම අපිත් හිතන්නේ මහ බැංකුව මේ වගකීම හරියට ඉෂ්ට කළා නැහැ කියලා. ඒ නිසා ඒ සම්බන්ධයෙන් පැහැදිලි කිරීමක් කරන්න පොඩ්ඩක්.
I'll answer. I hope I've picked up the things I haven't picked up. My colleagues, I hope, will help me. We have sent a report to the Presidential Secretariat on the 26th of October, which is essentially just a progress report as to what actions we have taken on each of them. That was on the 26th of October.
The day
yes.
President sacked the government.
That's right. That's right. That's right. So
is it after the sacking or before the sacking?
That I suspect it was probably after. So that's when we have sent him a present. But also
It was not on the papers, right?
Pardon me?
Wait.
So that's when we have really given him the report. The as for the other questions, there are these six. At the moment, I don't think it is wise. I must ask my legal colleagues whether it's wise for us to really go public on details of these audits, because there are various legal processes going on. So, if you look at the recommendations of the Presidential Commission of Inquiry on the bond issuances, you will see that they have identified areas where they think further work should be done. So these audits are in relation to that. ඒගොල්ලෝ identify කරපු ඒවා තමයි අපි follow up කරන්නේ.
නෑ ඒ ඔඩිට්ස් කරන්නේ සෙන්ට්‍රල් බැංක් එකද නැත්නම් වෙන ආයතන?
නෑ. අපි කරන්නේ audit කියන්නේ අර අපි අහලා තියන්නේ forensic audits වල expertise තියෙන කට්ටියට bid කරන්න කියලා. අනිත් එක අපි කියලා තියන්නේ ඒකේ global practice තියෙන companies තමයි මේක කරන්න තියෙන්නේ කියලා. ඒක කියන්නේ අර leaders have to come from outside Sri Lanka. ඉතින් අපි කරන්නේ එලියෙන් කරන්නේ අනිත් එක විදේශ there will be foreign expertise in each of the teams to conduct this. So it will be a very independent and transparent process.
EPF එකේ forensic audit එකක් වෙනම යනවාද ඒකේ හයට අදාළව?
අර කියන්නේ හයේ පංගුවක් ඒවා bond transaction පංගුවක් ඒවා EPF එහෙම ඒවා තියෙනවා.
Governor, how do you see the economic growth this year?
ප්‍රශ්නයට පොඩි
please.
මේ ඔඩිට් සම්බන්ධයෙන් මේ සියලුම ඔඩිට් ඇත්තටම සම්බන්ධ වෙලා තියෙන අර ජනාධිපති කොමිසමේ වාර්තාවේ රෙකමන්ඩ් කරලා තියෙනවා සමහර ඉරස්සල් කරන්න කියලා. එතකොට ඒව අනිවාර්යයෙන් මේ ටික අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම ඇතුළත්. ඒතොර ඒක ගැන බලනකොට මුදල් මණ්ඩලය තීරණය කරා මේව තව දුරටත් දැන් ප්‍රොෆෙෂනල් කමිෂන් එක බැලුවේ 2015 ඉඳන් ඒ සීමිත කාලයක්නේ. ඊට අමතරව කිව්වා 2004 ඉඳන් මේ 2008 ඉඳන් මේ වෙනකන් අර කලින් කරපු ඩිරෙක්ට් ප්ලේස්මන්ට් ගැනත් කරන්න කියලා. ඒතකොට ඒක ගැන සොයා බලනකොට ඇත්තටම අපි තීරණය කරා මහ බැංකුවේ මේක කරනකොට නම් තව සම්පූර්ණම ඔඩිට් එක ආව වෙන්න ඕනේ. ඊට කලිනුත් මේ ඩිරෙක්ට් ප්ලේස්මන්ට් වගේ පටන් ගන්න තියෙන 97 ඉඳන්නේ. එතකොට ඒ සීලුම දේවල් කාව වෙන්නයි EPF එකෙන් කරන්න දීලා සීලුම කාව වෙන්නයි කියලා ඒ ඔඩිට් 6 එහෙමයි නිර්මාණය කළේ. අනිත් එකක් මම හිතන්නේ අර උසාවියකින් තීන්දුව කර නියම කරලා තියෙනවා කරන්න කියලා. අනිත් අර ඒ සම්බන්ධ කම්පැනිස් වල මාකට් මැනිපුලේෂන් ගන්න අනිත් ඔඩිට් එක. ඒ සියලුම දේවල් කරන්නේ මොකද මේක මහ බැංකුව සම්බන්ධ නිසා මහ බැංකුවේ කිසිම කෙනෙක් මේකට සම්බන්ධ වෙන්නේ නැහැ. අපි කරන්නේ මේක ෆැසිලිටේට් කරලා ප්‍රොකියුමන්ට් කරලා දෙන එක විතරයි. ඒ නිසා තමයි ඔඩිටර් ජෙනරාල් තමයි මේක සම්පූර්ණයෙන් මේ ඒ process එක බාරකාරය විදිහට ඉන්ඩිපෙන්ඩන්ට් විදිහට කරන්නේ. ඔඩිටර් ජෙනරාල්ගේ ගයිඩ්ලයින්ස් අනුව national procurement guidelines පාවිච්චි කරලා කරන්න කියලා කියන්නේ සම්පූර්ණයෙන්ම ලංකාවෙත් නැතුව පිටින්ම ඇවිල්ලා ඉන්ඩිපෙන්ඩන්ට්ලි කරන ෆර්ම්ස් වල තමයි ඒක තෝරන්නේ. ඒක නිසා තමයි මේ ප්‍රමාදය තියෙන්නේ. ඒක හේතුව ඔය කියන ගොඩක් ඒවා වල දැනටමත් අර කමිෂන් එක ඉල්ලලා මහ බැංකුවෙන් අපේ ඇතුලින් වාර්තා සපයලා අපේ ඒවා දීලා තියෙනවා. නමුත් ඒක අපි ගන්න අපිම කරන එකට වැඩිය පිට කෙනෙක් කරන හොඳ නිසා තමයි ඒක පිටින්ම අලුතෙන්ම කරන්න කියලා ඔය සීලුම අපි කරපු සීලුම ඒරියාස් වලට අමතරව තව දුරටත් ඒ ඉන්ඩිපෙන්ඩන්ට්ලි පිටින් ඇවිල්ලා එක්ස්පර්ට් තියෙන ෆොරෙන්සික් ඔඩිට් එක්ස්පර්ට්ස් තියෙන ග්ලෝබල් ෆර්ම්ස් වලින් තමයි කරන්නේ. ඒක තමයි මේ process එක. නෑ ඒකේ කොටස් ඒක පහක් තියෙන්නේ. ඒ පහේ තියෙන ඒවා සමහර ඒවා තියෙනවා ඒ කාලෙට විතරක් බලන්න. සමහර ඒවා තියෙනවා දැන් ඩිරෙක්ට් ප්ලේස්මන්ට් ගැන බලනවා නම් ඒක මේ කාලෙට නෙවෙයිනේ අදාළ වෙන්නේ. ඒතකොට තමයි ඒක පිටිපස්සට යන්නේ. ඒතකොට එහෙම ඒ පහ තියෙන වෙන වෙනම ඒ අරගොල්ලෝ කියපු අඳුනා ගන්න කියපුවයි අනිත් එක තමයි කමිෂන් රිපෝට් එක බැලුවොත් පේනවා. කමිෂන් රිපෝට් එක කමිෂන් එකේ කියලා නැහැ මේ නීති මේ ෆොරෙන්සික් ඔඩිට් කරන්නේ අපේ තියෙන සම්සි වැරද්දක් වෙලා තියෙනවා ඒව හඳුනා ගැනීම මිසක් මේක සඳහා මේ නීති ඒක නීතිපතිතුමාගේ වැඩක් තමයි ඒව නීතිපතිතුමා පාවිච්චි කරන්නේ නැද්ද කියන එක වෙනම ඒ නීති ක්‍රියාදාමයේ වැඩපිළිවෙලක්. මේක කමිෂන් රිපෝට් එකේ තියෙන මේවා කරලා මේවා වැරද්දක් වෙලා තියෙනවා නම් ඒක හඳුනා ගන්න කොහොමද උනේ මොනවද උනේ කියන එක හඳුනා ගැනීම තමයි ඒකේ කාර්යභාරය. එතනින් එහාට ඒක තමයි අපි කරන්න උත්සාහ කරන්නේ. නමුත් ඒක ප්‍රයෝජනවත් වෙන්න පුළුවන් නීතිපතිතුමාට එතුමාගේ නීති කටයුතු කරන්න. නමුත් ඒක වෙනම process එකක් ඒ කියන්නේ. ඒතර ඒකට මේක ඇත්ත වශයෙන්ම ඔය 2000 මේ අවුරුද්ද මුලදී කියපු එකයි ඊට පස්සේ නීතිපතිතුමා ක්‍රියාමාර්ග කරගෙන යනකොටයි මේක මත නීති ක්‍රියාමාර්ග ගන්න කියලා නෙමෙයි කියලා තියෙන්නේ. ෆොරෙන්සික් ඔඩිට් කරන්න කියලා තියෙන්නේ අපේ තියෙන අඩුපාඩු හොයාගන්න මිසක් නීති ක්‍රියාමාර්ග ගන්න නෙමෙයි. ඒක නිසා තමයි දැන් තමයි නීතිපතිතුමාට අවශ්‍යලා තියෙන ඒ තොරතුරු වැදගත් වෙනවා අවශ්‍ය වෙනවා කියන එක ඒගොල්ලෝ නීති ක්‍රියාමාර්ග වලට. ඒක නිසා ඒගොල්ලොත් මේ කියන්නේ ඒක ඇත්තටම සාකච්ඡාව එන්න පළවෙනි හේතුව උනේ ජනාධිපතිතුමා නීතිපතිතුමාගේ අහුවාම මේකයි ඒගොල්ලෝ නීති ක්‍රියා ගැනීම ප්‍රමාද කියන අහුවාම ඒගොල්ලෝ කියලා තිබුණා මේවත් අවශ්‍ය වෙනවා කියන එක. එතකොට තමයි ජනාධිපතිතුමා අපෙන් අහලා තියෙන්නේ ඇයි මේක මොකද්ද මේකේ තත්ත්වය කියන එක. ඉතින් තමයි තොරතුරු අපි යවලා ඊට පස්සේ මීටින් එකක් තියලා මමත් ඒ මීටින් එකට හිටියා. මේකයි ක්‍රියාදාමය මෙහෙම යන්නේ මේක තමයි යන පිළිවෙල මෙච්චර කාලයක් ගන්නවා කියන එක පැහැදිලි විස්තර කරලා දීලා තියෙනවා. ඒක තේරුම් ගන්නවත් තියෙනවා. නෑ ඒකේ ඒ ප්‍රකාශය මම දැක්කේ. ඒක මම හිතන්නේ එතන ප්‍රකාශ කර එහෙම දැක් ප්‍රකාශ වුණේ නෑ. එතෙන්දී ජනාධිපතිතුමාට විස්තර කරනකොට අපි කිව්වා මේක 2000 ඩිරෙක්ට් ප්ලේස්මන්ට් සම්බන්ධව 97 ඉඳන්මනේ පටන් ගන්න තියෙන්නේ 2004 ඉඳන් මේක බලනවා කියලා. බලනවා කිව්වාම එතකොට කිසිම වෙලාවක ඒ කියන්නේ මේ ෆොරෙන්සික් ඔඩිටෙන් බලන්නේ යම් කිසි වැරද්දක් වෙලා තියෙනවද ඒ කාලේ වෙලා තියෙනවා නම් මොකක්ද පාඩු කියන හොයන එක. කිසිම වෙලාවක සඳහනක් වුණේ නැහැ කිසිම මහ බැංකු නිලධාරියෙක්ගෙන් මෙන්න මේකයි එහෙම එකක් කියන්න බෑ. මොකද ෆොරෙන්සික් ඔඩිට් කරන හේතුවම මේ මොකක්ද එහෙම එකක් වෙලා තියෙනවද වෙලා තියෙනවා නම් මොකක්ද පාඩු කියන හොයාගන්න එක. ඒතකොට ඒක දන්නේ නැතුව මුලින් ගන්න කියන එක කවුරුවත් කිව්වෙත් නැහැ. මම ඒක පැහැදිලිව ප්‍රකාශ කරන්න පුළුවන්. එහෙම එකක් මම දැක්කෝ ප්‍රවෘත්ති මාධ්‍යවල එහෙම ප්‍රකාශ කරනවා. නමුත් එහෙම දෙයක් මම සහභාගී වෙන නිසා මට වකීමක් කියන්න පුළුවන්. කිසිම මුදලක් මෙච්චර එකක් පාඩුවක් වුණා මීට කලින් කියන කතාව අපේ මහ බැංකුව විසින් මෙතෙක් එහෙම කියලාත් නැහැ. හොයාගෙනත් නැහැ. ඒක තමයි එහෙම වෙලා තියෙනවා නම් හොයාගන්න එක තමයි ෆොරෙන්සික් ඔඩිට් එකේ තියෙන ප්‍රධාන කාර්යභාරය. ඒක මම හිතන්නේ කොහොමද මම දන්නේ ඒක මීඩියාකට ආවේ කියලා. එහෙම එකක් ජනාධිපතිතුමා ප්‍රකාශ කරෙත් නැහැ එතෙන්දී. එහෙම එකක්. ඒක නෙවෙයි මම කියන්නේ මේ මීටින් එක පස්සේ කියපු ප්‍රකාශය ගැන මේ නෑ මීටින් එක පස්සේ කියපු ප්‍රකාශයේ එහෙම එකක් තිබුණාද මම දැක පත්‍රයක තියෙනවා මේ බිලියන 1000ක් කියලා කතාවක්. නමුත් එහෙම එකක් ඒ මීටින් එකේදී කිසිම අංකයක් සඳහන් වුණේ නැහැ. හැබැයි ජනාධිපතිතුමා සඳහන් කරා ඇයි මෙහෙම එකක් කරන්න අවස්ථාව වෙලා තියෙන්නේ කමිසමෙන් එහෙම එකක් නිර්දේශ කරලා තියෙනව නේද කියලා. ඒකට මම කිව්වා ඔව් කමිසමෙන් නිර්දේශ කරලා තියෙන එහෙම එකක් කරන්න. ඒක නිසා තමයි මේක කරන්න කියන එක. එතකොට මීට කලිනුත් එහෙම වෙලා තියෙනවා කියන එක කමිසම මගෙන් මේ සැක කරන නිසා කමිසම නිර්දේශ කරලා තියෙන එකක් කරන්න. ඒක නිසා තමයි මේ කරන්න කියන එක තමයි සාකච්ඡාව වුනේ. එහෙම නැතුව මේ කිසිම අංකයක් ඒ සාකච්ඡාවේදී අංකයක් ගැන ජනපදා කිව්වේ එක එක මට මතකයි අනිත් කතාව. විවිධ ආර්ථික විද්‍යාඥයන් කියනවා කියලා බිලියන 1000ක විතර පාඩක් වුණා කියන එක එතුමාට කවුරු හරි කිව්වා කියලා. එතෙන්දි මේ මීටින් එකේ කිව්ව කතාව නෙවෙයි කියන්නේ. ඒ කලින් කිව්ව කතාවක් ගැන තමයි එතුමා සඳහන් කරේ. ඒක ඉතින් ඒක එතුමාගෙන් අහගන්න කොහොමද මේ මාධ්‍ය අංශය කොහොමද නිවේදනය කරන්නේ? ඒ රැස්වීමද කිව්වේ නැහැ.
Governor, how do you see the economic growth for this year?
For this year?
Yeah, this year.
We haven't come to a final conclusion yet, right, on that. It should, I mean, as I was telling you, there are these tailwinds. When weather is good, in particular, that's a significant tailwind, not just in terms of agriculture, but also hydropower generation is a high value-added activity, which kind of contributes significantly to growth as well. So if we can increase our share of hydro generation from, say, what, 10-15% as it was, up to about 35% where it can be, then that will be also a boost to growth. My own view is that we need to look ourselves, I'm not blaming anybody else, all of us need to look very carefully whether we are recording GDP accurately. Because I don't think this is a 3% growth economy at the moment.
Are you suspecting the numbers?
No, I'm not suspecting the numbers in the sense that we adopted a new methodology about 2-3 years ago. That methodology, everybody says is excellent. People who know, I mean, I'm not an expert, but people who are experts say it's a very good methodology. But that methodology needs a lot of surveys to support it. We, at the moment, do not, CSD at the moment doesn't have the resources to undertake all the surveys that are necessary to support that methodology. So they tend to use proxies. When you use proxies, it tends to be a judgment call. So what is not certain is whether they have picked the right proxies, whether they have picked enough proxies, all that, because it's only a couple of years now they've had this new methodology. My own view is we are not recording GDP, we are understating GDP. Not that anybody is doing it intentionally. It's just the process of going into a new methodology, then the need to support that methodology with a certain amount of surveys. All that is kind of a work in progress. So, because if you look at it, I think the IMF said 3.5%. World Bank said 4%. We thought it was about 3.8%. So in my own view is that growth this year was somewhere between 3.5 and 4%, not 3%. 2018, sorry. 2018. That's my own personal view. I don't think it's 3. I think it's closer to between 3.5 and 4. But I think we are having challenges in terms of recording it. But, the Census and Statistics Department is the statutory authority. So they, you should talk to them about it. But they do have challenges in terms of resources to support this methodology that they have.
Governor,
yeah. Explanation.
Construction, we have seen stagnation on those sectors. So how do you see there is a growth closer to 3.5 with stopping of all the construction work, industries, everything, and with compared to 2014?
One particular number I have, I'm challenged by is the transport, that the transport contracted. I maybe it's true, but that's something that I have some doubts, because the proxies used for that may not be as complete as they could be. That's one sector. Similarly, I do think, if you look at, you leave the official forecast, official figure aside, and you look at all the others, the bank analysts, the international agencies, all of them are in the 3.5 to 4% range. But of course the CSD gets the data, right? They get the best data. So theirs is the best forecast. But because this is a very new methodology and they don't have enough resources, there is a possibility. I'm not saying it's certain, but my sense is that there is a possibility that there is an under recording of GDP.
Could the rise of sharing economies like Airbnb and PickMe sort of be?
That's right. So these are all things that we need to, maybe not recording, tuition. Then this, even the port city, I think there is some challenge in how to record that activity. So there are a number of methodology. I'm not saying anybody is doing anything wrong intentionally. It's just that we have a sophisticated methodology. We haven't still got the kind of surveys needed to support it. And in that transition period, there is a possibility, I'm saying there's a possibility, that we may be under-recording GDP.
What's the growth that you're looking at in 2019?
Sorry?
What's the growth that you're looking at in 2019?
Actually, next time you come, we are working on it. We'll tell you. It's
At
a
least
bit
first
early.
half?
Huh?
First half or first quarter?
I don't know. We'll wait and see.
Governor, when the currency was
Governor, you were talking about the political crisis. How do you think, how would you quantify that, or the effect of that on the economy?
I think it's very tough to quantify. It's very tough to quantify.
In terms of your three downgrades from rating agencies, then you're also saying that it's difficult to raise. So in terms of
we can maybe identify the channels through which the impact has taken place. But to say how much in dollars or rupees, that is quantifying it will be very difficult.
Would it have shaved off 0.5% of GDP, or?
No, I don't think so. But really, it's tough to say, because what are the channels? Obviously, domestic and foreign investment would have been affected. Tourism was affected. I don't know if because it has exerted pressure on the exchange rate. I mean the outflow of capital from the government securities market has been exacerbated, I suspect, because of the political uncertainty.
You can see that with fourth quarter GDPs.
Yeah, exactly. We haven't still, as Deputy Governor Rana Singh said, the fourth quarter GDP will give us a better idea of what has happened, because we haven't got that yet. So there are a number of chances. You see, why it's difficult to quantify is that the biggest impact is on sentiment and confidence. So we won't be able to quantify, this deterioration in sentiment and confidence. What is the counterfactual? What would have happened if this didn't take place? We really won't know. We really won't know.
Governor, when the currency depreciated, one thing we saw was importers stocking early and exporters holding their reserve earnings abroad. So now when the importers are bringing new stock under the new exchange rate situation, and if the exporters start to convert, if they see it stabilizing, don't you think that will create inflation in terms of the imports generating inflation from outside and the earnings power going up due to exports being repatriated? Do you see inflation going up in the short to medium term?
No, I think I'll get SCG also to talk on this, but essentially, clearly, there will be some impact on inflation through depreciation of the currency. So far, we have not seen much of a pass-through. Partly because in some of the areas which have a relatively high weighting in the cost of living index, some of the food items, for instance, domestic production has kind of become more competitive, and that has contained the inflationary impact. also, I mean, you know, in a inflation targeting framework where you're trying to set monetary policy for inflation in a year's time, so we are constantly looking to see if you see the depreciation pressure emerging, then one can use interest rates to combat that very quickly.
Do you see that pressure rising?
Not yet.
Not yet. And also,
Let that
I think this impact of exchange rate depreciation to final inflation, all the empirical evidence, that's one of the reasons why we are going to inflation targeting regime, is that inflation, future inflation can be anchored better under inflation targeting regime. All the countries which use monetary policy framework, inflation targeting monetary policy framework, exchange rate pass-through is minimum to the prices. That is the good part of the inflation targeting regime, where inflation can be anchored well, pass-through of exchange rates to the final prices can be contained through anchoring inflation expectation. That is what we have seen so far this year. And even our projections, we have the model-based projections. These projections of our models does not indicate any significant pass-through. Obviously, there will be certain. Even historically, if you look at 1% depreciation has, without inflation, before inflation targeting, has only 0.2% impact on inflation. But now the evidence basically is that under inflation targeting regime, it can be even lower. So that's why a lot of countries, inflation targeting framework is that you anchor inflation expectation, you allow currency to be more flexible and allow as a shock absorber to absorb local import competing industries, and that is the better part of the inflation targeting regime.
Your annual report said that your credit growth projection for this year was 13.5%, and it doesn't seem like you're going to be achieving that. And especially with construction slowing down, where exactly is this credit growth really going to? And are you worried that you are not reaching this 13.5% target?
Not over. How much average is how much?
If I can add again that thing. So under this new monetary framework, credit growth is only an indicator. It's not a target. Target is inflation. Instrument is interest rates. So the credit growth, private sector credit, overall monetary expansion. That's why if you can remember earlier monetary policy statements, used to announce overall monetary growth, private sector credit this much, that much. That we don't see any of this now. It's because that is only an indication to tell us where the pressures come into the currency, where the credits are going. So basically, there's no direct relationship between monetary aggregates and inflation and output now. That is why we are not too much concerned about whether it's 13.5 or 15% or 17%. It wouldn't make a big difference in terms of our final target of inflation and the output. That's why we no longer, in our monetary policy statement communication, we don't focus too much on aggregates, monetary aggregates. I think maybe we will end up at 15%. And we expected that just to be 13.5 or 14%. It doesn't make a big difference. I think your question is valid. Important one is that it gives us an indication credit is growing at a higher rate than we expected. Then we, from the macroprudential point of view, we need to look at where the credits are going, or for personal consumption, real estate, what are sectors. Obviously, then we can bring in certain macroprudential, say it's for vehicle imports, there's for gold imports, there's for real estate, or there's for apartments. For that purpose, it is useful. That's why we are still monitoring, analyzing those information. Not necessarily that will have impact on growth and inflation.
Could we know like which sectors they went to? Because
I think we published that quarterly survey. We'll give all details. Construction sector, what's the growth, agriculture services. I think we have some numbers. Sectoral wise, services sector credit grown by 12.7. Industry actually 17.8 growth. Out of the overall personal loans and advances 17.3. Industry 17.8.
What about vehicles? Is there?
Within that, the personal, I think, personal loans and advances 70.3. Probably there are personal loans which might include vehicles as well, in consumer durables, which is growing at 16.6%, credit cards 22%, personal education 53%, like this.
My
And
final question. Now, NBFIs, we have seen nearly doubling of bad loans in the second quarter, that's September. And the total capital adequacy has now reached down to 11%, while your regulatory minimum is 10%. So are you worried that there is an increased risk from NBFIs to the overall financial sector, and if so, how big of a risk is it?
Okay. Before I get to that, to supplement what SED is saying, my rather simplistic understanding of the flexible inflation targeting regime is, you have to do whatever it takes to hit the target. And then all these other indicators are in the model. So if the model shows you're within the target, that's fine. If it goes outside the target, you have to do something about it. So that is why I think all these things gets fed into the model, and you just look at what the target inflation is, and you have to do whatever, you adjust monetary policy to hit that. All these other indicators feed into it, are fed through the model. Now, in the NBFI story, first thing to understand is the total assets of the NBFI is 7%, right? 7.9%. So it's a very small part of the financial system. And the NBFIs which are fragile is an even smaller proportion. I mean, the big, strong NBFIs are very robust. Some of them are as strong as banks. So this long tail of rather vulnerable NBFIs account for a very small proportion of the total assets. Having said that, clearly there can be contagion effects if there is instability in some institutions. So colleagues working in that sector are very much on top of it. They've identified some fragile NBFIs, and they are in constant communication with them as to how they can have a more stable outcome. Some of them will have to actually merge because there is capital augmentation that is being required of them, and if they don't, then we will have to think of regulatory action. And we want to be pretty brutal in the way we apply that, because having 40 odd finance companies is just ridiculous. There just isn't the business for that. So we have to have a more stable structure, and we will move gradually without causing too much disruption to having a more stable structure.
Governor, how optimistic are you for the upcoming budget, especially in light of developments in November, for the government to resist the urge to go for a populist sort of budget?
Well, I don't know whether I'm optimistic or pessimistic, but I hope the government will be realistic.
How much influence can you exert from your end to ensure that they stick to that agenda?
Everything I've told you guys today, I've told them as to how dangerous the situation is.
He can explain how he decided the price.
No, don't want to put him on.
That's not his research.
Decide the price, you have to have some formula. Without that you can't.
It was not this. It was not this, right? Governor, what's the full amount of debt we have to pay in 2020?
External debt, $5.9 billion.
Not external, it's including SLD.
SLD, everything. So the total dollar-denominated debt, foreign currency debt is $5.9 billion.
Including SLD.
Yeah, everything. But now, if from that you should take away SLDBs, which are and FCBU stuff, and also there is also do you call it? Yeah, those things if you net out, I think the new money we need is about 2.9, eh? 2.9 billion, 2.9 billion, say 3 billion. We have to raise 3 billion.
Governor, is there, further to the earlier question, is there a possibility of doing a sort of a case study on that period and the impact of it, especially, I mean, in the long term also, to be instructive in the future so that it doesn't happen again? The economic cost of it.
You must get the think tanks to do that.
You can do it if you.
Yeah. But we might do it, but we're not going to publish it.
Quantify this, but would you say it's not so significant, or terribly significant?
Well, I would say it is significant. I don't know whether it's significant or very significant, I don't know. Because in a sense, for instance, in the short term, I don't know whether it's significant or very significant. You asked me, 3 categories. So it is somewhere. Yeah, no, it is in the it's significant to very significant range. Because, for instance, as I told you, on the 26th of October, we had a staff level agreement with the IMF. We had a provision to operate under the Liability Management Act to raise money. So if over the last 6 weeks, we could by now have raised a lot of the money we need for this year. So now we are starting only now. So we've lost 6 weeks. So clearly, and also in my view, the downgrade wouldn't have taken place. If you have a staff level agreement with the IMF, and if you have, you're demonstrating that you have this liability management, that we are triggering the Liability Management Act, because when we passed the Liability Management Act, it was very ratings positive. So when we triggered the first action under it, that also would have been ratings positive. The IMF staff level agreement would have been ratings positive. So it's very unlikely we would have got downgraded. Now, we don't know how many basis points it's going to cost us on all the money we are going to borrow. These downgrading by the 3 agencies. So if you add all, there would have been investment foregone. But of course that investment might come 6 months later. I mean, we don't know. But certainly in the short run, it has had a significant impact. No, we can get that separately. We don't have to, yeah. No, we can negotiate with other central banks and obtain swaps. Yeah. We're hoping to get, there's 400 million, I think this is already on public record, 400 million, there is a SARC swap with the Reserve Bank of India. We are hoping to get that quickly. And then we are talking to the Reserve Bank of India, we are talking to the People's Bank of China and I think Qatar Central Bank. No, not Oman. No, we are talking to banks, commercial, not we. We are helping the Bank of Ceylon, People's Bank, and NSB raise money from other commercial banks in the Middle East.
Are those loans guaranteed sovereign guarantee?
No. Well, I mean, ultimately those banks have a guarantee. Yeah. I mean, in the sense, no, they're not guaranteed. Those loans are not in the least bit guaranteed. But of course, these are state banks, yeah. I think by end February, there'll be a fair amount.
How much are they?
Difficult to say. I mean, on the 26th of, Mr. Article, correct me, on the 26th of October, we had somewhere between 750 and $1 billion lined up. 750 to $1 billion lined up on the 26th of October. Hopefully we can get that again, but it'll be at a high price. How is it? Huh?
Okay. Okay, then let's wind up the session. Thank you very much for coming and having interesting questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much.